Good morning to all participants who are joining us from South Asia. Good afternoon to those who are joining from East Asia and Australia. Good evening to those joining from the Western Hemisphere. And I really don't know how to welcome and acknowledge those who are joining from Europe, who are probably staying up half the night to be with us for the morning session. Anyway, wherever you are, welcome to the 2021 Winter School. On behalf of the Center for Development Economics and the Department of Economics of the Delhi School of Economics, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to our flagship event of the year. This year, for the second time, we are holding the event online due to the prevailing circumstances. Hopefully, we have learned a few tricks from last year's experience and we'll be able to manage a smooth delivery of the lectures and hosting of the sessions this year. I would like to welcome in particular our four very distinguished plenary speakers, Professors Tayfun Sonmez of Boston College, Michael Woodford of Columbia University, Whitney Nui of MIT, and Mark Rosenzweig of Yale University. Each of them will be delivering what is basically a mini course, a set of 3 lectures on frontier areas of research in which they are the leading proponents. This will enable participants to get a sense of cutting-edge areas and developments in the discipline. This year, in particular, they have agreed to host or to participate in breakout sessions after their respective concluding lectures. This will enable participants to interact with them more freely and informally and ask questions and take forward the discussion which may have had to be cut short in the question and answer sessions at the end of each lecture. These breakout sessions will therefore replicate to the extent possible one of the key features of winter schools in past years, that is the informal interactions after the lectures on the lawns of the Delhi School of Economics, which are usually quite nice in this season. Unfortunately, we have not been able to organize it in that format for the last year and this year again, but hopefully one day we will be able to welcome all of you once again physically enjoy that kind of setting. The Winter School has been running for almost 30 years as the flagship event of this institution, but its international profile has been elevated in the last 4 years thanks to partnership with the Econometric Society, which has made it one of their regional events. And the Econometric Society has also sponsored, very generously sponsored 4 cash prizes for the best papers presented in each of 4 thematic areas to be judged by our distinguished plenary speakers. Those prizes will be announced at the valedictory session at the end of the 4th day. I would also like to acknowledge our long-standing sponsors, the Export-Import Bank of India, which have been partnered with us for the last several years and have provided a financial cushion, which has enabled us to host this event. I would also like to acknowledge another sponsor, which would like to remain anonymous, another of our long-term sponsors. This year's winter school received 245 submissions. It was a Herculean task to select from them, and ultimately 160 papers have been selected to be presented in parallel sessions over the next 4 days. This Herculean task was managed efficiently by the members of the organizing committee, my colleagues, Dr. Anirban Kaur, Paramjit, Shumendu Shorkar, and Sudhir Shah, who, apart from coordinating with the rest of the faculty for the screening of the papers, worked tirelessly behind the scenes on the logistics, in particular the IT support, which is essential for hosting an event of this kind online. In this task, they were helped by the staff of the Center for Development Economics, which is the research adjunct of the Department of Economics, led by our very capable and hardworking manager, Ms. Deepika Goyal. She and her colleagues and the student volunteers who helped them will no doubt be further acknowledged in the valedictory session at the end of Saturday's proceedings. So without any further delay, let me now hand you back to the head of department, Professor Surinder Kumar, and we will then move immediately to the first plenary lecture. Let me wish all of you a very productive and enjoyable 4-day interaction with, of course, the speakers, and also perhaps the younger researchers here will get a sense of others working in other institutions who are interested in similar topics, and this event may be a platform from which some collaborations may emerge. And before I leave, perhaps I should give you a glimpse of what we hope will be possible from next year onwards. That is the lawns of the Delhi School of Economics, where we normally have our tea and coffee breaks and lunches, where these informal interactions usually take place. This is the view of the building in winter normally, and with, I hope, rational expectations, I presume that we will meet many of you on these lawns in the years to come. Thank you very much, and please take full advantage of all that this event has to offer.
Thank you, Aditya. And now I welcome you all on this flagship event of the Department of Economics. As Aditya said that this event we are having for last 30 years annually, regularly this is happening. And we have fortune to have all distinguished speakers every year. And in this series, this year also we have 4 very, very distinguished speakers, from which I hope you will have an opportunity to learn the frontiers of the research. So I now declare this year winter school open. Thank you so much. Somendu?
Over to you, Professor Ghosh.
Okay. I am Parikshit Ghosh. I will be chairing this session for our first distinguished speaker. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Professor Tayfun Sonmez. He's professor of economics in Boston University. I don't want to take too much time. For those of you who work in economic theory, he needs no introduction. For the rest, let me just say one or two things. Professor Sonmez is most well known for his work in the area of mechanism design and market design, broadly speaking. But within that area, he is one of the world's leading experts on matching theory. And so he carries on a tradition which goes back to famous economists like Gale and Shapley and Alvin Roth. He's carrying their tradition. And of course, all the usual things apply. Professor Sonmez has won many, many distinctions. He's widely published in the top journals of the profession. Let me just say my personal appreciation of his work, the aspect which I find most impressive and exemplary, which is that he combines rigor with relevance and practical application and impact. And this is very, very rare. This unique combination which we see in his work. He has worked extensively on both the theory and practice of matching kidney donors to kidney recipients, and also in school choice, the structure and design of how students will be matched to schools. Both of these are areas in which advances and innovations obviously has great human impact. So he has advised governments, and his theoretical work and insights has informed the design and the redesign of many kidney matching programs, as well as school, the structure of school matching in Boston and other places nationally and internationally. I am, as you will see, he's presenting 3 lectures, and 2 of these lectures directly address some of the important issues of our time. His first lecture is going to be about affirmative action in India, and the third lecture is going to be about the sort of foremost issue of the day, which is the sort of design of policies to tackle the pandemic. So I am greatly excited and look forward to listening to his talks. Let me just say a few things about the ground rules. We have this breakout session, as Professor Bhattacharya mentioned, which is, I think, at 10:30. So all of you who are, I'm sure you'll have lots and lots of questions for Professor Sonmez. So we have an entire 1-hour session for that. For this session, I want to reserve most of the time for Professor Sonmez because he has a lot to say. So if you have any questions, please try to keep the questions during the talk. Try to keep it restricted to clarificatory questions mainly, and you can type it in the chat box, and I will keep track of the questions, and if there are any breaks, I can channel some of these questions to Professor Sonmez. Otherwise, Typhoon, you can, you control it. I leave everything to you. I'm here just as an enabler. So you control when you want to take questions and so on, all the details. Thank you very much for transcending all the time differences and all of that, and agreeing to give these 3 lectures. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Parikshit, for this very generous introduction. And also, I'm delighted to be here. Of all places in the world, I would want to give this talk actually in India. And the very first seminar talk I haven't ever given before, actually. I was too busy with pandemic-related projects. So I'm very, very excited. So before I start my lecture, let me give a brief idea of what I'll try to do in these 3 days. In each day, I will talk mostly about a specific paper, but I will also, they will be rather representative in, what we are trying to do in this field. And I'll try to illustrate, how policy and research can inform each other. And if we take modeling seriously, if we take, what policymakers and people want seriously, we have lots of tools at our disposal, which can generate lots of valuable, output, not only for scholarly purposes, but also for interdisciplinary research and policy. So let me start my first lecture with this, brief point. Okay, so the first talk is directly about affirmative action in India, and in particular about the reservation system, and it's joint work with Bhumin Yanmas. 1950 Constitution of India sanctions affirmative action for government jobs, positions at public universities, and legislative seats. For each of a number of disadvantaged groups, a fraction of positions are reserved. There are two levels of provisions. There are higher level provisions and lower level provisions. Higher level initially intended for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, then other backwards classes, and very recently economically weaker section. Whereas lower level provisions were for people who are disadvantaged, but not due to historical reasons. Although economically weaker section is also kind of different than the original vertical reservations. Okay. The concepts of vertical and horizontal reservations do capture these higher level and lower level provisions. They are introduced in the landmark Supreme Court judgment, Indira Sawhney and others versus Union of India in 1992, which is also very widely known as the Mandal Commission case. I'm sure many of you have heard about this case. Vertical reservations, which I will also refer to as VR protections, correspond to provisions sanctioned under Article 16.4 of the Constitution, intended for historically discriminated groups such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes. And it is to be earmarked in the form of an set-aside. So this means positions secured on the basis of merit do not count against those reservations. Okay? Horizontal reservations, on the other hand, or which I will refer them as HR protections, correspond to provisions sanctions under Article 16.1 of Constitution. It is intended for other disadvantaged groups, such as persons with disabilities, women, and so on. And it is to be provided as a minimum guarantee. I'll be very clear about what all these means. But loosely speaking, it means positions secured on the basis of merit do count against horizontally protected positions, unlike the vertical reservations. In India, individuals can belong to at most one VR protected category. Because of that, in the absence of horizontal reservations, so if there wasn't any horizontal reservations, implementation of vertical reservations is very straightforward, and it can be done with the following choice rule, which we call over and above choice rule. There are two steps. In step one, you allocate open positions to highest merit ranking individuals. And then in step two, for each of the VR protected groups, you allocate the reserve positions to highest merit ranking members of the group who remain unassigned. This sequence makes it sure that positions allocated in step 2 are extra over what these groups would receive from open positions. Most applications in the field, however, also involve horizontal reservations in India. For example, 4 to 5% of positions are horizontally protected for persons with disabilities, and this is federally mandated. And 30 to 35% of the positions are horizontally protected for women in several states. Moreover, unlike vertically protected groups, which do not overlap with each other, horizontally protected groups, in principle, could overlap with each other, and they definitely overlap with VR protected groups. Okay, therefore, it is less clear how the two policies can be implemented together. While Indira Sawhney in 1992 clearly lays out the principles that guide standalone implementation of either policy, it does not provide guidance on their concurrent implementation. Because of this, right after Indira Sawhney, many public institutions had difficulties designing their systems because there is no procedure. There are some principles. There were lots of lawsuits. As a result, in a follow-up Supreme Court judgment, also very influential, Anil Kumar Gupta versus State of Uttar Pradesh in 1995, this gap has been filled where the following procedure is devised and enforced throughout India. Let's call this rule SCI-AKG choice rule. This is a very important rule for this particular presentation. So there are, the main idea here is the following. Remember that vertical reservations, when you just have vertical reservations, they're straightforward to implement. You just allocate open positions first based on merit, and then you allocate reserved positions based on merit, right? This procedure starts exactly in that particular way, but that becomes a tentative outcome rather than definitive outcome. Now, when you do that, maybe the minimum guarantees are already satisfied, right? Okay, so maybe you might not even do anything. So in step 2 of the procedure, utilizing individuals who are not VR protected, so these are general category individuals in India, that's what, how they are referred to as. For open positions, you make any necessary adjustments to recipients of open positions to accommodate horizontal protections within open positions. So what do? You take open positions, there is a tentative allocation, and then if there is woman reservation, for instance, and if it is like 30%, but you only accommodated 25%, you remove the lowest score man and add the highest score woman who is not admitted, however, only from general category, okay? And this is key. So basically, you first do adjustments for open positions. When you do adjustments for the open positions, some of the high score reserve category candidates might be displaced, right? And earlier on, lower score reserve category members receive the extras. You get the first 2 adjustments to correct those, and then also corrections as they are needed for horizontal reservations within each vertically protected category, okay? So this rule is called, well, I'm calling it SCI-AKG choice rule. A critical mandate in this judgment, which was in red in the previous slide, however, has introduced a number of anomalies into the procedure, sparking thousands of litigations in India for the next 25 years. Most critically, the SCI-AKG choice rule fails the following 2 properties often generating unintuitive outcomes at odds with the philosophy of affirmative action. The properties that often fail are the following. The property I refer to as no justify envy. So if this property is satisfied, that means a higher merit ranking individual cannot lose a position to a lower merit ranking individual unless that is of strictly lower privilege. So you can admit lower merit score individuals for affirmative action purposes, but you don't want to do the opposite. You don't want to be admitting a low score general category candidate at the expense of a higher score reserve category candidate. And yet this happens under SCI AKG choice rule. Another related failure is lack of incentive compatibility. An individual should never lose a position simply because he or she declared her protected status. So basically, just because you give your vertical category information, you shouldn't lose an opportunity to get a position. The root cause of both failures is the denial of VR protected individuals their open category horizontal protections if they claim their vertical protections. Okay, so I think what basically happened is, this is the previous slide, over and above rule is very simple, right? And groups do not overlap there. You first allocate, open, well, they do overlap, but it doesn't matter because you first allocate open positions anyways, and then the rest of the groups do not overlap. But when you do adjustments, there are some intricate overlaps because, for instance, a scheduled caste woman, in addition to qualifying for vertical reservations for scheduled caste, she also is eligible for, horizontal reservations within scheduled caste, and in principle also horizontal reservations among open positions. So there's lots of overlaps. I think the court probably want to simplify the procedure by making people who are doing the adjustments also do not overlap, by restricting attention to general category individuals for the adjustments. But then this causes lots of trouble. Okay, so let me give an example for how this mechanism works. What I'll do is, there are some redundant steps. For instance, you don't need to implement over and above first. All you need to do is fill open positions. You don't then need to fill the reserved positions because they will be adjusted anyways, right? So I will do I will skip a few redundant steps, but give the main idea. So suppose there are twice as many candidates as the positions. This open, there are some, for example, 80% of the positions are open, 20% are vertically reserved. The red positions are vertically reserved. And within each, you have 50% horizontal reservations. Okay. Now, suppose this bar represents general category men. So blue color is associated with general category, more privileged group. And red and its tones are the reserved category, like scheduled caste, for instance. Okay. And suppose there are the mass for reserve man, general category woman, and reserve woman, they are the same, and their merit scores are uniformly distributed in this range. Left is higher score candidates. Okay. And then you have 3 times as much general category man. Okay. So let's first fill the open positions, starting with the highest score people. When you do that, what will happen is, 40% of each of these will go the highest score people, and they will fill the open positions, right? There will be 3 times more general category men than other groups. But observe that you don't have enough women here. Only 1/3 is a woman, right? So what do you need? Now, the procedure itself also deals with the reserve, but it's a redundant step. So I will slightly delay it. It will not change the outcome. So let's do the corrections right now. So what do? You remove the positions of both general category and reserve category men back, right? Until the remaining, this light area plus the gap becomes half of the open positions. And then what do? You fill these positions. But adjustments are not allowed for reserve category women. So this entire region will be filled by general category women, okay? And then you fill the red positions. Actually, part of red was already filled, but then we would correct it. So I'm combining all these steps just to simplify the analysis. Obviously, half of this should be women, right? And as a result, this will be the outcome, okay? And these bars represent the cutoff scores. Here, observe that the cutoff score for reserve women is higher than the cutoff score for general category women. What does this mean? Like all these, general category women who are now here, they have lower scores than, say, these scheduled caste women. So that is the problem with this mechanism. Okay. Now, this is not just an abstract problem. This was a very important issue in India, and many similar issues are still big deal in India, as far as I can tell. So I will give you a sense of the nature of the crisis. In numerous cases, public institutions resisted adopting the mechanism that I just mentioned, and they did allow reserve category candidates to benefit from open category horizontal protections, probably to avoid this issue that I mentioned. However, often they face litigation from lower merit ranking general category candidates who are not selected because they have lower scores, but the law actually gives them the position. For example, this case in Rajasthan High Court is a large-scale litigation with 120 petitions against the state of Rajasthan. State allowed reserve category women to benefit from open category horizontal protections. High Court ruled that the state is at fault and ordered the state to adopt the Supreme Court mandated procedure. As you see, there was resistance to implementing Supreme Court's mechanism. The second case is pretty much similar, but it is very interesting because it is a very polarizing case. So this case mimics the previous case. 25 petitioners litigate against the state of Uttar Pradesh for allowing reserve category women to benefit from open category horizontal protections. The counsel for petitioners argued that the error was intentional. So not only there is a case, litigation, there is a fight. So let me read. The action of the board is not only motivated, but purports to take forward the unwritten agenda of the state government to accommodate as many number of OBC as C candidates in the open category. The judge of the case ruled that the state must correct their erroneous application of horizontal reservations, emphasizing that the state has played foul. There is merit in the submission of the learned counsel for the petitioners that the conduct of members of the board appears not only mischievous, but motivated to achieve a calculated agenda by deliberately keeping meritorious candidates out of the select list. I'm constrained to hold that both the state and the board have played fraud on the principles enshrined in the Constitution with regard to public appointment. the state appealed the judgment and lost the appeal as well. Okay. Another case from Rajasthan High Court. This case is also similar to the previous ones, but the decision is different. So here a general category petitioner litigated against the state for allowing reserved category women to benefit from open category horizontal protections. So far the same as the previous cases. Unlike the earlier ones, however, the case is dismissed at the High Court. The petitioner appealed the decision, bringing the case to a larger bench of the High Court. The appeal is also dismissed. As apparent from the court proceedings, the judges had difficulty entertaining possibility that a procedure mandated by the Supreme Court possibly could have that failure. Okay, so they say the outstanding and important feature to be noticed is that it is not the case that the appellant petitioner that she has obtained more marks than those 8 OBC women candidates. Okay. Okay, so there are lots of cases like that. Now, let me give another side of the coin. In numerous other cases, a public institution that correctly used the Supreme Court mandated procedure faced litigation from reserved category candidates who are not selected despite having higher merit scores than their general category counterparts who are selected. And recall that the Supreme Court's rule actually allows for that possibility. But it's unintuitive, so they go to liquidation. For example, look at this case at Bombay High Court. Following the law, state used the Supreme Court mandated choice rule, which resulted in an instance of justified envy. A reserved category petitioner brought the case to the High Court. The judges granted the petition, stating that the candidate cannot be denied an open category position based on her reserved category membership. So what happened? Well, there is no merit in the lawsuit because unfortunately the method allowed for justified envy, but even though it is highly implausible. So I presume Asha Ramnath Golab, sued the state because of that counterintuitive outcome, and she won, right? Because judges of the High Court were also puzzled. Okay. Now, let me also give you some other issues associated with the lack of incentive compatibility. It's somewhat related, but as you see, there are many aspects of this crisis. While applicants are entitled to declare their social categories or traits, they are not to do so in India. Okay, you're not supposed to say, I'm from scheduled caste and I want that vertical reservation. You're not required to do that. Since the SCI-AKG choice rule is not incentive compatible, withholding this information may make sense, actually, right? And let's look at the next case from Bombay High Court. Several candidates withheld their reserve category memberships so they could take advantage of the open category horizontal protections. So that's completely legal. This is completely kosher. And they have to be somewhat sophisticated to realize that that could potentially benefit them, actually. So maybe they were given that information. Maybe they were organized. I don't know. Authorities requested personal information to identify their reserve category memberships and evaluated their applications as if these candidates claimed their VR protections, even though they didn't. The candidates were all denied positions despite having higher merit scores than their general category counterparts who are selected due to open category horizontal protections. So these people were sophisticated to realize some of the details of the Supreme Court's rule, and they gave up their vertical protections to claim their horizontal protections. But it didn't work. The state didn't allow. So they went to court. They lost the case despite the faulty implementation. Indeed, the faulty implementation seems to be systematic in this region, and it seems to be intentional as revealed by the court proceedings. So let me read this. This is very interesting. According to respondent, Maharashtra Public Service Commission, in view of the circular blah blah, only the candidates belonging to open category, non-reserved category, can be considered for open horizontal reserved posts, meaning thereby the reserved category candidates cannot be considered for open horizontally reserved posts. So far, so good. References made to the communication issued by the additional chief secretary of the state of Maharashtra dated 26/07/2017, whereunder it is prescribed that a female candidate belonging to any reserved category, even if it tenders application form seeking employment as an open category candidate, the name of such candidate shall not be recommended for employment against an open category seat. So what is this telling us? Well, even if scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBC candidates give up their vertical protections, the state doesn't allow them to benefit from open category horizontal reservations. One last case, which is conceptually related. This is also at Bombay High Court. This petitioner did declare her reserved category membership, despite the lack of VR protected positions for her category. So she said, I'm from scheduled caste, but there are 0 positions reserved for scheduled caste. Okay, so she has nothing to benefit, but she lost open category horizontal positions. So she lost access to open category horizontal protections, which in turn resulted in an instance of justified envy. So some lower score general category woman received the position rather than her. Prior to bringing her case to the High Court, she filed a petition to a lower court. Her case was dismissed. Then she appealed to at the High Court, which in turn was granted. But I've seen many other cases that are similar, but they are dismissed. So the bottom line is there are all kinds of combinations of problems associated with this flow of the Supreme Court's method. Okay, how many of these cases are there? This is from 2 years ago. Now it's more than 2,000 of these cases. So I know that there is a talk about Indian Kanun actually in this conference, and I benefited from this depository immensely, and otherwise I wouldn't know the details of these court cases. But this is a huge issue, thousands of cases, and these are High Court and Supreme Court cases alone. This doesn't include lower courts. Okay. Now, this issue also causes lots of trouble in recruitment, as I'm sure you must be aware. Let me just read the last part of this newspaper story. Interestingly, the Force Department is recruiting on these posts after a long gap of 26 years. The advertisement was issued in 2010 and recruitment took place in 2016 amid too many litigations over the issue of reservation. A major issue, that of women reservation, is yet to be decided by the court. With the recent observation by the High Court, the merit list will now be changed for the 3rd time. Those already selected and at present under training might lose their jobs, and half a dozen new candidates might find their names on the new list. However, all appointments have been made by the High Court conditionally and subject to final outcome of these multiple litigations. Okay, so this is not fun, basically. I mean, this flaw in the Supreme Court's procedure is very consequential. Okay, now, since the root cause of the crisis is simply the denial of VR protected individuals, their open category horizontal protections, a simple and intuitive solution lies in the removal of this restriction. First, focusing on the case where horizontally protected groups do not overlap, we refer this alternative procedure as the two-step minimum guarantee choice rule, 2SMG choice rule. So this will play a very important role in our presentation. Now, why am I first interested in the case where horizontally protected groups do not overlap? First of all, it's an interesting case. Many applications just have one horizontally protected group, which is persons with disabilities. But more importantly, the court's rule itself is not well defined when horizontally protected groups overlap, actually. It allows for multiple interpretations. And the law is written, I mean, the judgments are written as if horizontally protected groups do not intersect, okay? And I will first cover that case, but we will generalize our proposed solution and justify it for the most general case, okay? So our first observation is this simple amendment in the Supreme Court's rule 2SMG satisfies no justified envy and incentive compatibility. So this method will actually fix the problem. We will tell a lot more, but the problem is solved with this simple modification. And simple modification is good because, you know, the more you deviate from methods in the field, the less likely they will be adopted. Okay, so let's go back to the earlier example and now use two-step minimum guarantee rule. So what do? You first fill the open positions, so the same method. But now what do? Okay, so 2/3 is men, 1/3 is woman. That's not enough. You need at least half of the positions need to go to women. So just like the Supreme Court's method, you remove men back, lower score men back until this light area plus the gap is half of the open positions. But now, instead of just filling them with general category women, you fill them with all women, okay? And then you fill the reserve positions, and this will be the final outcome. Importantly, now the cutoff scores are just as you expect them to be. You know, lower privileged people are allowed to be admitted with lower score, but not the vice versa. Okay, so this is a very simple adjustment. Now, despite the large-scale disarray it created in the country for a quarter of a century, the failure of this SCI-AKG choice rule was never addressed by the Supreme Court prior to the March 2019 circulation of our paper and Sonmez and Yanmez. So this is the first draft of the paper I'm presenting. We changed a lot because of several developments that I will keep continuing, that I will keep talking about. The ongoing crisis due to the flawed choice rule was our primary motivation when we started this project and proposed the two-step minimum guarantee choice rule as a possible remedy. We actually also published an op-ed in the Hindu with Parag Patak about some related issues around that time. A landmark December 2020 judgment, just about a year ago, a landmark judgment by a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court not only addressed the failure of the SCI-AKG choice rule, but also reshaped some of the questions of interest for our paper while it was under review for scholarly publication. So the paper was submitted to Econometrica. It received very demanding but positive reports, but then the pandemic happened and the revision was very demanding, so it sit there for like 8-9 months. And we worked on the 3rd lecture, basically, on pandemic resource allocation. As I found time, I went back to the revision and I tried to figure out, what's going on in India, what's going on with EWS reserve, which was sued by people. Just as I was trying to learn what is going on, I realized something almost unbelievable happened. It's like a miracle. Okay, so these are the headlines. Okay, from that December 2020 judgment. Basically, the exact same points we are making were made, and Supreme Court basically acted on it, using arguments parallel to the ones I have been giving you for the last 40 minutes. The justices reached the same conclusions in Saurabh Yadav versus State of Uttar Pradesh as we have earlier reached in our analysis. Most notably, with this recent judgment, the axiom of no justified envy is mandated for all choice rules used in India. So this condition is now mandated. Long-standing SCI-AKG choice rule is rescinded due to its failure to satisfy this axiom. As a possible replacement for the SCI-AKG choice rule, the 2-step minimum guarantee rule, guarantee choice rule that we have been pushing for is endorsed, although it is not explicitly mandated. Okay? And there is one very delicate point, very subtle point. Clarity is brought to implementation of vertical reservations in the presence of horizontal reservations at a level that was not available before. Okay? In order to elaborate on the broader implications of this reform in India, we next proceed our presentation with the formal analysis. Okay? So now the next part will be a bit more mathematical. Okay. There are 2 identical positions. Calligraphic I is the set of individuals. Each individual is in need of one position, and each individual has a distinct merit score. If they are not distinct, each institutions have their own tie-breaking rules. There is always a strict ranking in India. While individuals with higher merit scores have higher claims for a position in the absence of affirmative action policies, disadvantaged groups are protected through 2 types of affirmative action policies: vertical reservations providing VR protections and horizontal reservations providing HR protections. Vertical reservations are managed through a system of category membership. Calligraphic R is the set of reserve eligible categories. So these are like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, so on and so forth. G is a general category for those who are ineligible for VR protections. This row function gives everybody's category, reserve eligible category. So if if row of I is empty set, it doesn't build, it means you don't have any reserve eligible category, which means you have general category. Okay. And otherwise, if row I is equal to C, it means you belong to reserve eligible category C. QC of the positions are reserved for members of reserve eligible category C. We'll call them category C positions. And I will use the terminology of eligibility. And individual is eligible for category C position if and only if she is a member of category C. Okay. The remaining positions are open positions, and everyone is eligible for these positions. Okay. Now, I will also indicate the categories for positions, and this will be R union O. Okay. So basically, this O is different than G. O is open positions, and everybody is eligible for them, not only general category people. So that's why I'm not using the terminology of general category then. And even some of the cases use that terminology, and I believe all this part of the confusion is because of that terminology, possibly. Okay. So let calligraphic I of V be the set of individuals who are eligible for category V positions. If V is open category, then this is basically everybody. But if V is a reserved eligible category, vertical category, then it is only members of that category. Okay. So now, what is a solution concept? A solution concept is a choice rule. But first, I need to talk about a single category choice rule. Given a specific category, this could be open or this could be scheduled task category, a single category choice rule is a function which selects a subset of individuals from any given set of individuals in such a way that, first of all, only if when the set of individuals who apply is I, you pick from that set, but only those who are eligible, right, for category V. And then you do not go over. You don't pick more positions and more people than the number of the positions. So this is a single category choice rule. What is a choice rule then? A choice rule is something very similar, but now you have a number of single category choices attached to each other. So basically, a choice rule specifies who gets scheduled task positions, who gets scheduled try positions, and who gets open positions. Okay? So the first condition is same as above for each category. But the second condition is, obviously, you shouldn't pick anybody for more than one position, right? Everybody should get at most one position. I will also sometimes use the CHET terminology, which simply collects everybody selected across all categories, and that I will call aggregate choice rule. Okay. Horizontal reservation policies are managed through a system of trait ownership. So vertical reservations were managed through category membership, right? Horizontal reservation policies are managed through trait ownership. Let calligraphic T be the set of traits associated with horizontal protections. For instance, if you are a woman, you have woman trait. If you are disabled, you have person with disabilities trait, so on and so forth. This tau function gives your traits, and at each category V, QVT positions are the number of horizontally protected positions for trait T at category V. Okay, and it means these are the minimum number of category V positions that must be guaranteed to eligible individuals with trait T, to the extent you have enough people, of course, with the trait. We will call these positions category V horizontally protected positions for trade T. Okay. Now, in India, while each individual is a member of a single category in R union G, she may have multiple traits. Like you can have a disabled woman, for instance. We refer to horizontal reservation policies where an individual can have at most one trait as non-overlapping horizontal protections, and HR policies where an individual can have multiple traits as overlapping horizontal protections. We will start our analysis with the more basic case of non-overlapping horizontal protections for several reasons. First of all, it's considerably simpler, but more importantly, court rulings are presented for this case. The SCI-AKG choice rule is not well defined for the more general case, so the comparisons will be kind of tricky. The failure is already prominent without any overlapping structure. Overlapping aspect is an additional technical aspect. The failure has nothing to do with it, really. And the policy implications of our findings are sharper in this particular case, okay? So horizontal protections are provided within each vertical category on a minimum guarantee basis. This means that positions obtained without invoking any horizontal protection still accommodate the horizontal protections. So this is we didn't have that in vertical reservations. And given any category V horizontal protections can be implemented with the following choice rule that we call minimum guarantee choice rule. So what do? For each trait, you first allocate the horizontally protected positions to highest score members with this trait. And in what order you carry out this procedure within different traits doesn't matter, because everybody has at most one trait. We are in the world of non-overlapping traits, okay? And at step 2, for unfilled positions, which will be all open positions, and maybe you'll not be able to fill some of the horizontal protected as well. For all of them, you choose the highest merit score individuals who are still unassigned, okay? Now, so this is just for one category, okay? Like, for instance, just for open positions or just for scheduled cast positions, looking at scheduled cast individuals, not for the whole problem. But since protections are implemented on an over and above basis, and HR protections are implemented within each vertical category on a minimum guarantee basis, in Sonmez and Yanmez 2019, we proposed the following two-step implementation of the minimum guarantee choice rule as a natural procedure for the concurrent implementation of the two policies. We call this rule two-step minimum guarantee choice rule. And I already mentioned you this rule actually in my, less formal presentation. I'm telling the same thing again, but somewhat more formally. Given a set of individuals' eyes, what do? Well, you first apply the minimum guarantee rule to everybody, not just general category candidates, everybody. And at step 2, for each of the reserved categories, you do the same for the people who are not matched in step 1, as long as they are eligible for categories. Okay, so basically, this is a two-step implementation of minimum guarantee rule. Okay, as we have already done earlier in this presentation, this rule can also be defined through the kind of adjustments that are used by the Supreme Court since Anil Kumar Gupta. So I could have first used over and above rule, and then I could have made these adjustments. This is a more efficient way of getting the same outcome. Okay. Saurav Yadav 2020 marks the end of an era where a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court brought an end to the 25 years tenure of the AKG SCI choice rule and endorsed the 2-step minimum guarantee choice rule. This rule, actually, 2-step minimum guarantee choice rule, before it appeared in the Supreme Court's ruling, first appeared in India like 4 or 5 months earlier in Gujarat in a high court ruling. And it is actually now mandated for the state of Gujarat, not just endorsed. And it seems this is how the Supreme Court became aware of this rule. But Gujarat's ruling is also subsequent to our work. Another key mandate in Saurav Yadav 2020 is the enforcement of the axiom of no justified envy in case a choice rule that differs from 2-step minimum guarantee is adopted by a public institution. Perhaps due to the aftermath of the enforcement of the previous rule, AKG SCI choice rule, the justices of the Supreme Court have merely endorsed the 2-step minimum guarantee choice rule and refrained from enforcing it. Okay, so they didn't enforce it, they just endorsed it. However, there is one misleading aspect of this seemingly more flexible guidance on the selection of an allocation mechanism. So, accurately identifying the root cause of the crisis as the failure of no justified envy under the rescinded SCI AKG choice rule, the justices have mandated this important axiom under the new ruling. On top of this axiom, 3 additional desiderata are also mandated with Saurav Yadav 2020. We next formulate all 4 mandates as rigorous axioms. The first axiom is non-wastefulness. It means a position can only remain idle if there is no one who is eligible, who is unmatched. Okay, and this condition obviously is a very mild efficiency condition. It's not new, it's been mandated since Indra Sawhney's landmark case. To formulate the next 2 axioms, next 3 axioms, I will give an additional definition. Okay, I will say that given a vertical category V, category V HR maximality function NV is simply the following. Now, I have a bunch of traits, disabled, woman, suppose these are the, and suppose I have 10 positions for disabled, but only there are 5 disabled applicants. Obviously, I cannot honor all disabled positions because I have just 5 disabled people, right? So the relevant number is the smaller of the horizontal reservations and the number of applicants with the trait. And across, if I add this number across all traits, I get the number of horizontally protected positions that I can possibly honor, okay? Meaning award to their intended beneficiaries. So I will use this NV function. Now, this NV function is trivial if the horizontal reservations do not overlap, but it's very interesting. It plays a very important role in our extension when horizontally protected groups do overlap, okay? But in this case, it's very simple, okay? Now, the next property is maximal accommodation of HR protections. What it's saying is, well, you should use up all the horizontal reserve protections, not just some of them. And it means an individual cannot remain unassigned if she can increase the number of horizontally protected positions that are honored at some category for which she has eligibility. So I cannot be unmatched if I'm disabled and if disabled positions are not filled in a category that I'm eligible, right? This condition became mandated in India only recently with Saurabh Yadav in this stronger form, simply because it failed before under SCI AKG choice rule, because VR protected individuals were ineligible for horizontal protections within open positions under this rule, right? So that's, what caused all the flaw also caused this axiom also not to be satisfied. Okay, but now it is enforced in India with the new ruling. Okay, this is the no justified envy axiom that we already talked about, and it is at the core of Saurabh Yadav. That's the main topic of our paper, if you wish. Excuse me. At any category V, a lower merit ranking individual can receive a position at the expense of a higher merit ranking individual who remains unassigned only if replacing with I with J decreases the number of horizontally protected positions that are under that category V, and that's why I received the positions with lower score and J hasn't. Okay. The last axiom is the following, and it specifies who should receive open positions and who can receive vertically reserved positions. So in a way, it kind of captures the idea of over and above nature of vertical reservations or higher level provision aspect of vertical reservations. A choice rule C complies with VR protections if for each set of individuals I and reserve eligible category C, whenever an individual I receives a reserved position, thereby not receiving an open position. So this is what is important is not only that the person receiving a reserved position, but also not receiving the open position. Then the following three conditions must hold. You must have filled all open positions. You cannot start filling reserve positions, vertical reserve, before filling open positions. People who did receive open positions, and I didn't, either should have higher scores or they should be increasing the number of open category horizontal protections that are satisfied. There is no other way. I can get a reserved position, vertical reserved position, and somebody else gets an open position. Okay. Now, the third condition is very interesting, and it's a new mandate in Saurabh Yadav. And what it says is the following. Now, this individual I, who received a vertical reserved position, maybe did horizontal adjustment, maybe didn't, but did receive a reserved position, vertical reserved position. And maybe the person already made an adjustment for scheduled tasks, for instance. Okay. He cannot do that if he can also increase utilization of open category horizontal reservations. So if you were to choose between open category horizontal adjustment and reserve category adjustment, this condition is saying you got to handle open category horizontal adjustments. Okay, so this is a new condition which wasn't there before. Okay, this will be very important because it closes a very important gap. Apart from enforcing the axiom of no justified envy and rescinding the SCI AKG choice rule, Saurabh Yadav 2020 also brings a much needed clarity to a subtle aspect of implementation of VR protections in the presence of HR protections. When the concept of vertical reservations was introduced in Indra Sawhney in 1992, its defining characteristics was described as follows. it may well happen that some members belonging to, say, scheduled caste get selected in the open competition field on the basis of their own merit. They will not be counted against the quota reserved for scheduled caste. They will be treated as open competition candidates. However, no judgment of the Supreme Court prior to Saurav Yadav 2020 explicitly formulated what it means to get selected in the open competition on the basis of merit when there are also horizontal protections. To a large extent, much of the disarray in relation to concurrent implementation of vertical and horizontal reservation policies boils down to this ambiguity. This vagueness is now removed under Saurav Yadav 2020, where an individual who gets selected in the open competition on the basis of merit is legally defined as one who deserves an open category position on the basis of merit with or without invoking the horizontal protections. So even if you deserve it by invoking horizontal protections, you still cannot be counted against the vertical reservations, okay? This is very important, okay? Collectively, the mandates in Saurav Yadav 2020 have a very sharp policy implication. Perhaps this is the most important slide, one of the most important slides. Suppose each individual has at most one trait, as it is the case in the court description of the court rulings. A choice rule satisfies the four axioms, each of which is mandated now in India, if and only if it is the two-state minimum guarantee choice rule. Okay, so what does this mean? While Saurav Yadav 2020 has not explicitly enforced and merely endorsed the two-step minimum guarantee choice rule, it has indirectly enforced this choice rule through its other mandates. You look all the institution, if anybody doesn't implement a rule which wasn't endorsed, meaning they don't use two-step minimum guarantee, sometimes it might give the same outcome. If it doesn't, a lawyer can find somebody who can sue and be correct. Okay, so basically there is only one rule that can be used now legally, and it is the two-step minimum guarantee choice rule. Okay, so now let's go to perhaps analytically a little bit more involved part of the problem, and where the court rulings do not fully specify what should be done. So I will next extend our analysis to the general version of the problem with overlapping horizontal protections. In India, VR protected groups do not overlap with each other, although they overlap with horizontally protected groups. So far, we assume that horizontally protected groups do not overlap with each other either, meaning individuals have at most one trait. And we did that because court cases seem to abstract away from any complications due to overlapping HR protected groups. However, in many field applications, HR protected groups do overlap. So the key question is, or one of the key questions is, does a member of multiple horizontally protected groups count towards minimum guarantees for all these groups or only one of them? If there is a disabled woman, does she count for minimum guarantee for women, for disabled, or for both of them? This aspect is left unlegislated and left at the discretion of central planner. Okay, so there is flexibility here. However, we adopt the latter one-to-one HR matching convention, meaning we will let everybody to consume only one, at most one minimum guarantee. It gives clean solution, and this seems to be the more widespread implementation in the field. Actually, I wasn't able to find any place where they implemented the other version convention. And more importantly, position numbers are typically announced in India for category trade pairs, which automatically embeds this convention into the solution. For example, the following table is already from Saurav Yadav. Okay, so interestingly, even though they are discussing everything as if traits are non-overlapping, in reality, they actually are, even in the application, which is the topic of Saurav Yadav. So look at here, for instance, they give positions for that. Scheduled caste, ex-serviceman, 5% minimum guarantee. Scheduled caste, female positions. So basically, you either consume one of these positions or those positions, but not both, obviously. So this structure already embeds this convention into the problem. So this is the more common methodology. The next question is, why not just use two-step implementation of the minimum guarantee choice rule here as well, right? The reason you might not want to do that, although probably most institutions might do it, but a reason not to do it is the following. At step one, when you accommodate the horizontal protections, when there are overlaps, in what order you carry out these minimum guarantees may change the outcome. Okay, and let me give an example. Okay, now this is from another presentation actually, but it's the same concept. So we are thinking in the context of minimum guarantee. Okay, so these are horizontal reservations. There's one open position, and the normal priority ranking is I1, I2, I3, I4. There is one essential, red essential personnel reserve, one disadvantage reserve. Okay, and the red guy is eligible for essential personnel reserve. The blue guy is eligible for disadvantage reserve, but the purple guy is eligible for both of them. Okay. So, and their normal priority is this, but for the red positions, the people who are red eligible, which are I2 and I3, are upgraded to the top of the queue. Same thing for blue, but except for people who are eligible for blue positions. Now, let's implement minimum guarantee rule first by starting horizontal reservation for red E, and then horizontal reservation for D, blue D. Okay, if we do that, who is the highest priority red eligible person? The purple guy. Okay, so the red position goes to her. Then the highest priority blue person is I4, and then the highest remaining person is I1, and we are done, which means you give the positions to I1, I2, and I4. Okay, but if you instead first fill horizontal reservation for D and then E, then the flexible purple guy now accommodates the blue horizontal reservation. Okay, and then the next red position goes to highest red eligible person, I3, and then the open position again goes to I1. You give the position to highest top 3 people. Why would you want to give these positions to 1, 2, and 4 when you can give it to 1, 2, 3, right? So basically, this purple person who could accommodate either horizontal reservation, say disabled and woman, how you want to manage it really depends on who is next in the queue, right? So that you allow the highest priority upcoming people to benefit from that. Okay, so the bottom line is processing horizontal protections in a mechanical way with a fixed sequence of traits may lead to implausible outcomes. The outcome may depend on the processing sequence of horizontally protected groups. Higher merit score individuals can be rejected at the expense of lower merit individuals without increasing the overall representation of horizontally protected groups. Horizontally protected groups may be needlessly underrepresented. Okay? Admission of an individual with multiple traits present a flexibility in accommodating horizontal protections, but that flexibility is lost under the minimum guarantee choice rule. Okay, so you don't want to do that. This flexibility can be utilized to obtain a more meritorious outcome, as we have illustrated with the example, to formulate a choice rule that achieves this this objective. We first need to generalize the HR maximality function for each category V. Now, for the simpler case, this was just a summation of minimum of horizontally protected numbers and persons, number of persons with the trait, right? But now we need to do something more tricky. So this function is trivial for the case of non-overlapping horizontal protections, because processing of horizontal protections for different groups do not interfere with each other in this environment, whereas in the more complicated environment, it does. In contrast, the maximum number of horizontally protected positions that can be honored depends on who accounts for which minimum guarantee constraint when horizontally when horizontal protections overlap. Now, given a category V and a set of individuals I, let NV of I be the maximum number of horizontally protected positions that can be awarded. There's a lot of math involved here, but there is a clean way to solve this. That is what matters. And it can be done through several polynomial time algorithms, such as Edmonds' Blossom algorithm. And this benefits from maximal matching theory in discrete math or graph theory. Okay, I will say that given a category V and a set of individuals I, an individual I increases horizontal utilization of group I if, when I include this individual, the number of horizontal reservations I can honor increases by 1. Okay. Now we are ready to formulate a choice rule that extends the minimum guarantee choice rule in a smart way by utilizing the flexibility in accommodating the horizontal protections under the one-to-one HR matching convention. Okay, so this is a one category solution, and we call it Meritorious horizontal choice rule. At step 1.1, you choose the highest merit score individual with a trait with positive number. Denote this individual by I1. If there is no such individual, you go to step 2. And at any following step, until this step doesn't work anymore, assuming such an individual exists, you choose the highest merit score individual that remains, who increases the HR utilization of the group of people that you so far have. You denote this individual by IK and add that person to the list, and then go to the next step. Eventually, HR utilization cannot increase anymore when you reach a maximum. At that point, for all unfilled positions, you choose unassigned individuals with highest merit scores until either all positions are filled or all individuals are selected. In the interest of time, let me skip the analysis for single category. Let's formulate and propose a choice rule for the model in its full generality with overlapping horizontal protections now. And and now it should be obvious what I will do. I will call this two-step meritorious horizontal choice rule, and I will implement the meritorious horizontal choice rule first to open positions and then to each of the reserved positions, very much like the previous case. So basically here, all I did is really, I replaced minimum guarantee choice rule with a smarter version, which responds to this flexibility, which I call meritorious horizontal choice rule. And this rule reduces to minimum two-step minimum guarantee rule, which is now de facto enforced in India, if there are no, if horizontal reservations are non-overlapping. Okay. Now, our final result shows that two-step meritorious horizontal rule is the only plausible allocation mechanism for the general case of the problem with overlapping horizontal protections, because I have the same theorem here, but without making any restriction on the number of traits an individual can have. A choice rule is non-wasteful, maximal. A choice will satisfy the four axioms if and only if it is two-step meritorious horizontal choice rule. In conclusion, over the years, Indian judges have done a fantastic job of formulating various desiderata in reservation policies, but designing mechanisms to implement these desiderata often requires additional expertise. They had to do simply too much. This is where collaboration with market designers can provide very concrete benefits to the society. The failure of Anil Kumar Gupta SCI choice rule is only the tip of the iceberg. For example, the problem have a more complex version in India that many of you are probably aware of, where positions are heterogeneous across multiple institutions, right? So you don't have just 5,000 positions, police positions in one institution. You have 300 positions IIS, you have 400 positions at the Postal Service, and now you have to rank them, right? So Supreme Court judgments for this more complicated version of the problem not only have similar failures, which are not corrected yet, but in addition, they are also inconsistent with each other, okay? A natural solution in this more elaborate version of the problem is you use the choice rule that we have just formulated together with the celebrated deferred acceptance algorithm, okay? And in a paper that we are writing right now, and it will replace actually this 2019B, because we will use some of the motivating cases from there in that paper. If you include, if you generalize the four axioms that are mandated already, but for the case of uniform goods, you know, like homogeneous goods, if you extend the same idea also to the heterogeneous case, and consider this more elaborate version of the problem, in addition to the four axioms that we have, if you add individual rationality, which simply means no individual should get a job that they didn't rank, okay, and strategy proofness, you know, dominant strategy incentive compatibility, it is the unique rule. So these choice rules that I formulated today potentially have lots of important role in India, hopefully. Okay, but thank you very much. I think there is still some time for some questions.
Thank you very much, Typhoon, for an absorbing and interesting talk. So we have 5 minutes to go. So at this point, I would invite audience members to ask questions through the chat box. So if you can just type your questions in the chat box, I will relay them to the speaker. Any questions?
I made everybody sleep.
No. I think they are still processing all the things that they have heard. So in your, okay, I think we have a question here.
Maybe it's easier if they directly ask. I mean, if somebody wants to ask,
Yes,
is it feasible?
I think that's true. So, Mandu, can we unmute people who want to ask questions?
Yeah, sure. So we have only 5 minutes, but I will, so after 5 minutes, we'll request the, participants to, wait for the breakout session later in the evening. So here, questions are coming on the chat box. IT team, you may unmute the audience as well.
So this particular analysis is specifically for the rulings that is covered, in the judgments that I mentioned. However, if you want to, and the reserving is not always possible, sometimes possible, in some years it is possible, in other years it's not possible. The reserving aspect of the problem is trivial in the sense that, when does the reserving becomes relevant? If, for instance, in the second step of the procedure for vertical reserve positions, if you somehow cannot fill those positions, obviously, you can use them any way you want, right? So, but because these details are specific to the particular job, and because the reservation is not even allowed in certain cases, it really depends, right? I mean, in some cases, you gotta wait 3 years and add the position to the next year, right? But it is so basically, the answer is the presentation is directly for the cases that are covered by these judgments. And indeed, it is government positions. However, accommodating the reservation is somewhat trivial because it happens only at the end of the procedure. But I mean, who knows what will happen with the characterization, of course, because that's a slightly different model now, right? So, but the positive result will hold, uniqueness might not. That will depend on particular details. Doctoral degree seats allocation. And is the question, do you mean also with the reservation system? Oh, absolutely. I mean, so this very last slide, like you are using similar systems like for medical schools, also for government positions when the positions are heterogeneous, right? And you do have reservation, both vertical and horizontal. Now, the challenge in India is the following. Problem is a very simple version where there is only one type of position and vertical reserves. That's very easy. Now, when there was horizontal reservations, there are issues which are a little bit easier to solve if they are not overlapping, which happened after 25 years very recently, as we discussed, right? But you can even deal with overlapping horizontal reservation case. But then there is another complication where there are multiple jobs, right? Now, a key problem in India, and that's the second paper, is the following. Because the society is so used to first allocating the open positions, in that version of the problem, you also allocate all open positions across all jobs with serial dictatorship now. And then you allocate all vertical reserve positions, again, with serial dictatorship. And then you decide things like, okay, I received my third choice from open, but second choice from reserve. Now there's a court case, Monday, I think, which says you can transfer, right? So because you deserve your third choice open, but second choice reserved, nobody can force you to get the open position, okay? But then the following became a big issue. Now, I vacate that third choice. Who gets that third choice? Because I was holding it as a scheduled cast candidate. Does a scheduled cast member inherit my property right or not? It turns out for medical schools, it's decided one way. For government jobs, it is decided another way, okay? But actually, there are other inconsistencies even in the decisions themselves. This entire issue is happening because of the artificial property rights created. You don't need to do that. And you don't need to use that concept of meritorious reserve candidate and migration. You can do everything all together. And in particular, you can do that for the allocation of doctoral positions, any kind of two-sided matching. I find it absolutely amazing that actually these higher level provisions and lower level provisions are clearly formulated by the Indian Supreme Court, because this concept was never identified before, and there is lots of confusion that happened in US, in the world, because they couldn't differentiate between two policies. But the problem is India is so much more involved. You have them together. You have them together with multiple justices. But the beauty of it is there is a crystal clear, clean solution for all of this.
Typhoon, there are a couple of questions which is kind of relate to the new reservation for economically weaker sections in the general category. So your reactions to that in particular, that seems
okay. So actually, in the 2019 versions of my papers, I made a big deal of this because that EWS reserve passed just as we were about to circulate the first versions of these papers, okay? And if Yadav et al. Did not correct the flaw in the Anil Kumar Gupta, if you had like 2,000 court cases, you would have like 2,000 every year. Why? Well, you have a 10% EWS reserve now, and it is vertical reserve, right? Okay. And in many states, you have woman reserve, which is like 35%, 30%. So, but then horizontal reservations are not allowed for anybody who is VR protected. Well, right now, without EWS, only 25% of the population is not VR, 25 to 30%, right? But with EWS, 80% of them are also VR protected, which means about like 6% of the people are the new general category. Now, if women, the way this interacts with the previous flow is horrible. Why? Because only the new general category women are eligible for the woman position, woman adjustments among the 40% open positions there, right? So basically, there is this really, really subtle, unintended consequence where, I mean, of course, none of this is intended, but the previous 25 years of chaos is not intended either. And indeed, in Yadav et al., Supreme Court said, oh, you guys all misinterpret what we meant. This was never supposed to happen. So the EWS really contradicts really badly, interferes really badly with the flow, both the old flow and the flows in the heterogeneous good version of the problem. And indeed, there is a slight discussion of that in that second paper, which is a working paper. We will significantly revise that paper in light of what happened with Yadav and with this new result. But the aspect of the EWS is absolutely fascinating. These flows would become like maybe there would be 10 times more litigations, and it is kind of, it won't happen with homogeneous good case, but it will happen with medical school admissions. It will happen with government, like IIS allocations, is together with some other positions. It will keep happening and in large number, but all that can be corrected. Okay, so I don't have a position in terms of whether there should be an EWS reserve or not, right? I mean, you guys know your history, whether vertical reservations should only be given to historically, oppressed groups or other disadvantaged groups as well, or after so many years, then the concept should be changed. My job is not making judgments on those issues, but my job is clarifying their implications.
Okay, so this is a fascinating discussion and we can go on more. So there were a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we are really out of time and the parallel sessions are going to start soon. So I'll have to call this to a close. Let me remind everyone that Professor Sonmez's next talk will be at 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, which is 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And those who have registered for the breakout session, I strongly encourage people to attend that with your questions. And those who have registered already will get a link for the breakout session in their inbox. Please join me in thanking Professor Sonmez for a fascinating talk. Reservation and affirmative action in India is one of the most it's an instrument for social justice, but also it's something which animates discussion and debate and our politics. So thank you for your insights on that. Thank you very much.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so with that,